السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. ما يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters, I welcome you back to our Hajj presentation. And today is the day of the 26th of Dhul Qa'dah, 1444 years after the Hijrah, or the migration of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, which coincides with June 15, 2023. Last time when I discussed the issue of traveling and the Qasr and the Jama, a lot of brothers they asked the question, what is the definition of Safar? What is the definition of Islamic traveling? When I can consider myself as a Musafir? And after I consider myself as a Musafir, is there any distance limit, time limit that would restrict me to pay the Qasr? This question we could not address it in the previous section, but inshallah gonna discuss it today because this is related to the journey, and Hajj is one of the blessed journey we have, and so that the brothers would know. Let's say somebody here from Austin going to Pakistan, and from there they're going to Hajj. Their question is, when I go to Pakistan, can I pray Qasr? Because it is my hometown. So what should I do? And these questions, inshallah, will become clear once we first of all understand what is Safar and what are the misunderstanding that is related to what is the definition, correct definition of Islamic travel. Once we understand that, inshallah, many of these questions we can tackle in our future episodes, inshallah. First of all, the definition of Safar is when a person travels from his hometown to a city or town that is far away, and not from that town where he is traveling is not from one of his neighboring towns. Then this is called a Islamic travel or a Safar, or he becomes a Musafir. For example, we live in Austin here. Austin's neighbor towns are Buda, Kyle, Georgetown, etc. So when we travel from Austin to Buda, and I use the word travel here in English, okay, meaning we are going from Austin to Buda or Kyle or Georgetown, this is not considered as a Safar. And so I'm not a Musafir then. I can, let's say, go from Austin to Buda, stay there for one night. My work allows me to do that. Then I go from Buda to San Marcos, which is way south, and I stay there for another day. Then I go from San Marcos to all the way in the north to Georgetown and stay there from another day, and then come back home after 5 days. All this time I was, quote unquote, use the word travel, I was traveling. Am I a Musafir? I'm not a Musafir, because I was traveling, I'm moving around or traveling around between the neighboring towns of Austin. But if I go from Austin, my intention is to go to Houston, which is not one of the neighboring towns of Austin for sure, or Dallas, for example, then once I cross the city limit of Austin, the Qasr becomes obligatory, and I am a Musafir then. I am a Musafir from the time I start my journey from the home. But I cannot pay Qasr unless I cross the boundary of Austin. This is because the Prophet ﷺ, when he intended to go from his hometown, Medina, where he was staying, to, for example, Quba, Masjid Quba, to pray there, and Quba was definitely one of the neighboring town of Medina at that day, on those days. He intended to go there to travel to pray in that masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ said, you cannot make a journey, a safar, to travel to a masjid to pray there. So since he went to Masjid Quba to pray, so his moving or his traveling from Medina to Quba was not considered as a safar. Similarly, in our time, when we are living in our town, from if we move from our hometown to neighboring towns, this will not be considered as a Islamic travel. I hope, inshallah, then the definition would kind of make sense. One of the practical steps that you can take is, first of all, study the map of your town. You need to know what is the map of your town that you live in. Second, take into consideration what is known as the greater area. and it depends on the which country you live in, because there are different terms. And I'm gonna give you two examples here. One of the Austin that I live in, and another town which is my birth town in Bangladesh. And I'm gonna give you two examples to show you something, so that you would understand how to study these maps, so that you would be able to figure out, when I am traveling to here to there, I know this is not a travel, but when I go around outside this boundary, then I know that I'm traveling, and I can pray the Qasr, and I'm a Musafir. So for example, look at this map on the right hand side here. This map shows the Greater Austin area map, which includes, on the left side, I put the list of the towns: Austin, Buda, Bastrop, Bertram, Burnett, Dripping Springs, Elgin, Kyle, Tyler, Round Rock, Cedar Park, Georgetown, Pflugerville, Hutto, Gerald, Leander, Liberty Hill, Lockhart, Manor, Marble Falls, San Marcos, Wimberley. Literally, there are 22 towns that are clustered in this, like, colored map over here. And inside you see this gray map, which is kind of looks like a spider, gray map. That is the Austin map, the Austin city map. So when I go from, because I'm leaving that gray map, so when I go from there to any of these other like reddish type of area, this is not considered as Safar. I'm not a Musafir. I'm traveling, meaning like I am moving around, but I'm not a Musafir. But once I cross this, once I intend to go from the gray area to any area or city or town that is not part of this red greater area, that is when my traveling will become a Safar, and I will become a Musafir. So here another example. Austin, you can see from the left hand side, and Houston on the east side. So now when I am traveling from Austin to Houston, I'm a Musafir. But I cannot pray Qasr until I leave the boundary of what? Which town? Austin. So let's go back here. Let's say I'm traveling from Austin to Houston. When would the Qasr become obligatory? I live in the southeast part here. I'm showing you with the marker here, southeast part. So when I travel east side this way towards Houston, I don't have to wait to cross the boundary of the greater of Austin. Once I cross the boundary of Austin city limit, I will pray the Qasr. So let's say that I am in Austin now. I intend to go to Houston. It's a time of Dhuhr. I want to pray Dhuhr, and I want to combine that with Asr. Is it allowed? Yes, it is allowed. But since I'm inside the city limit of Austin, I have to pray Dhuhr 4 rakah. And if I want to do the Jama, I can pray the Asr 4. I have to pray the Asr 4 rakah. But let's say that I travel out of Austin and I'm here somewhere. I'm here somewhere in the greater area of Austin. Let's say I'm in San Marcos. So remember, San Marcos is the greater city of Austin. If I'm traveling from Austin to San Marcos, I'm not a Musafir. But now I'm a Musafir. I'm in San Marcos, I'm a Musafir. Why? Because my intention is to go to Houston. So I'm in San Marcos. Let's say I stop in San Marcos. I say I want to pray my Dhuhr and Asr. What should I pray here? I should pray the Qasr. Why? Because I'm outside the city limit of us. And this definition is extremely important for us to understand, so that we do not get confused with different things we hear from different people. The Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ, as Anas ibn Malik, he said that when he intended to go to for his Hajj journey, he prayed the Dhuhr 4 rakah in Medina. And when he went to Dhul Hulayfa, and Dhul Hulayfa is very close to Medina, it's one of the neighboring towns. But when he went to Dhul Hulayfa, he prayed Asr 2 rakah. These are the examples which are there in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that indicate this understanding that, inshallah, I'm trying to make it clear to the brothers and the sisters. So when you are in Austin and you are flying for Hajj, once you cross you are starting your journey, you are already a Musafir. You can combine the Salat. Let's say your flight leaves from Austin at Maghrib time. I'm just saying, let's say that at 10 o'clock, you have very well reached the time of Maghrib. You intend to pray your Maghrib and Isha in the plane. Can you do that? Yes, you can do that. or you are waiting in the lounge in the airport. Can you pray your Maghrib and Isha? Yes, you can. But since now you're in Austin, you have to pray Maghrib 3 rakah, which is always 3 rakah, and Isha, you will pray 4 rakah. But let's say that you get in the plane, you're sitting in the plane. Now you want to combine. The plane is still in the runway, not started. You're still in the city limit. So now you want to pray Maghrib and Isha. Now you cannot stand up and pray, you sit pray. That's okay. You sit and pray Maghrib, and your Isha will be 4 rakah. But let's say that the plane took off, and you know for sure that the plane has crossed the limit of Austin boundary, way past. Here maybe somewhere in Houston, whatever. Now you want to combine your Maghrib and Isha. You pray Maghrib 3 rakah, and now you pray Isha 2 rakah. You must pray Isha 2 rakah, because Qasr is not optional. Qasr, or shortening the prayer, is obligatory. If a Musafir makes a prayer 4 rakah, his prayer is batil. His prayer is rejected. He has to pray, or he has to make then 2 rakat again and make the prayer correct. This is the map of the Greater Austin area that I was showing. You just have to study the map and of the town and the city limit that you live in, and the greater area of that town, like in our case Austin, to study, and so on. Let me talk to you about another town, city, which is a very famous city in Bangladesh called Chittagong, and I was born there, so it's a special town for me. When we look at the map of Chittagong, we have two maps here to consider. One is this map, which is the Chittagong city map. This is a very small area, and if you look at the city area, you have this, and the down you have Patenga, you have Hali Shahar, and the middle you have the Pachlaish, where I was around that area I was born, and the north you have Salimpur, on the right you have Bua Khali and other places. Here you have Potia. This is the town, the hometown of my great grandparents. Let's say that we are traveling from Chittagong city to Potia. Is this going to be considered as a Safar? It will not be considered as a Safar. Yes, we are going to cross the city limit of Chittagong, and it's going to take a long time to go from Chittagong to Potia. But yet, this will not be considered as a Safar. Why? Because we have to look at the other map, which is known as the map of the Chittagong metropolitan area. And this is the bigger map. So when you look at the bigger map, you see it covers a much bigger area. So we are, as you can see here, this is the Chittagong I'm showing here, the city where we usually go. So if you go from here to a place called, let's say, Fotik Chori, okay, or let's say in Potia, or in the south, Anwara, this will not be considered as a Safar, because we are still in the greater area of Chittagong, or the metropolitan area. Also the Shondip, which is another very famous town, and this is also an ancestral town of my great grandparents. If you go over there, it will take maybe 3, 4, 5 hours. Okay, yet this will not be considered as Islamic Safar, because they are all part of the greater metropolitan area of Chittagong. It became a bigger map now. But let's say that we are traveling from Chittagong to Cox's Bazar. Cox's Bazar is a very famous, beach town. So if we are going there, Cox's Bazar is outside the Chittagong metropolitan area. So now, if we are traveling, after we cross this, red or magenta colored area, after we cross this limit, our Qasr becomes obligatory. Or let's say from Chittagong we go to a place called Khagrachari, and this is one of my uncle. He works there as a doctor. He always goes there. So if he travels from Chittagong to Khagrachari, which is not part of the Chittagong metropolitan area, then this will be considered as a Safar. And once he crosses the limit of the Chittagong city, it will become obligatory for him to pray the Qasr prayer. Obligatory for him to pray the Qasr prayer until he returns back to Chittagong, and doesn't matter how long he stays in that area. So you have to study your map, the city or the town that you live in, and the country that you live in. Each of the areas have their own maps, own names and things. You have to study it really well to understand that concept, and to see what is a Safar, what is not a Safar, and Allah knows best. Is there any minimum distance after which Qasr becomes obligatory? Some of the scholars, they say Qasr doesn't become obligatory until you cover 25 kilometers. Some say 70, some say 80, some say 120. All of this has no proof. There is no minimum or maximum limit. Uh, as I showed you from the map of Austin, that we live in the southeast Austin. And if we are going towards eastern side, which is towards Houston, it will maximum take 20 minutes maybe for us to cross the city limit of Austin, or maybe 15 minutes to cross the city limit of Austin. Uh, and it might be couple of kilometers, okay? Couple of kilometers, not much. But Qasr will become obligatory. The concept is not the time, the concept is not the distance. And this is what Imam al-Bukhari mentions in Sahih al-Bukhari. He says, the traveler starts shortening after leaving his town. Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he left his town, he started shortening while he was able to see the houses. And when he came back, it was said to him, this is Kufa. But he said, we will continue shortening until we enter it. Although the isnad of this story is weak, but the meaning of this story is authentic, and this is why Imam al-Bukhari, he reported this in his Sahih al-Bukhari in the Kitab al-Jumu'ah, Abwab Taqsir as-Salah, the chapter of shortening the Salah. Is there any maximum limit in a certain town after which a Musafir cannot pray Qasr? This is a very common question people ask. Why? First of all, before we study anything else, there is no maximum limit of days, months, or years after which a Musafir has to stop Qasr. There is no maximum limit. Even if a Musafir stays in a town for an unlimited number of days, months, or years, he will keep on praying Qasr, and he must pray Qasr. This is provided he considers himself as a Musafir. There is no evidence to limit it to a certain number of days. Now, why there is so much dispute? Because some of the ulama, they put conditions. Imam Ahmad, very famous in his madhab, they said that if somebody intended to stay at a place for 4 days, he cannot pray Qasr. He has to complete his prayer. But if he intends to stay in a place less than 4 days, then he has to pray Qasr. Okay. Imam Malik and Imam Shafi, they said if one intends to stay for more than 4 days, he should perform the whole salah. But if he intends to stay for less than that, then he should offer the Salat al-Qasr. Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab they said if somebody intends to stay for 15 days, he should do the Qasr. And if he is going to intend to stay less than 15 days, then he can pray Qasr. If he intends to stay more than 15 days, he cannot pray Qasr. If he intends to stay less than 15 days, he should pray Qasr. He should pray Qasr. So you see, some of them, they put the condition 4, some 15, others said 19, and many other opinions are there. Is there any proof for this? No proof for this. These are just opinions. Now look at some evidences. Anas ibn Malik reported, and this is in Sahih Muslim, when we went out from Medina to Makkah with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu he prayed 2 rakah each time of the prayer till we returned to Medina. I said, meaning the sub-narrator asked Anas ibn Malik, for how long did you stay in Makkah? Anas said, for 10 days. So if he stayed for 10 days in Makkah and he shortened his prayer, so how come some people, they said, you cannot continue to pray Qasr if you intend to stay more than 4 days? You can see the contradiction here. And we know the general rule that if an opinion of a scholar, regardless how great he is, or the opinion of a group of scholars, regardless of how great it is, if it contradicts the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, we do not pay attention to those opinions. We grab onto the Sunnah and the madhab of the Sahabat al-Kiram Ridwanullahi Ajmain. Ibn Abbas reported the Prophet ﷺ stayed in Makkah for 19 days, during which he prayed 2 rakah in each prayer. And this is reported in Sahih al-Bukhari. Bishr ibn Harb said, I asked Ibn Umar, O Abu Abdurrahman, how long to offer the traveler's prayer? He said, if you follow the Sunnah of our Prophet, I'll tell you. But if you do not, I shall not tell you. We said, O Abu Abdurrahman, the best Sunnah of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, when the Messenger ﷺ left Medina, he did not pray more than 2 rakah till he returned to it. And this is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and according to Imam Ahmad Shakir, the chain of narration is authentic. Next narration is the narration of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. and it's also in Musnad Imam Ahmad, and the isnad is Sahih. Abu Aliya Ar-Riyahi, he said, Abu Bakr addressed us, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, addressed us saying, the Messenger ﷺ said, 4 rakah is for the residents and 2 rakah is for the traveler. And it's important to point out here that some scholars, they consider Qasr as a rukhsa. Qasr as a rukhsa means they say, if you pray Qasr, it's good. But if a Musafir wants to complete his prayer, it's also okay. This opinion is not correct. This opinion is against the Sunnah of the Prophet. Because if somebody is a Musafir, he must pray the Qasr, and Qasr is never 4. Qasr was always 2. We know that in the beginning, the traveler's prayer and the resident's prayer was always 2. In the beginning, when the 5 times prayer was revealed, Dhuhr was 2, Asr was 2, Isha was 2. Then later on, Allah Ta'ala increased the resident prayer to 4. So the Qasr was never 4. Qasr was always 2. So you will hear these things. But when you know the Sunnah, you see, regardless of how big a scholar he is or how respected he is, this opinion cannot, if it contradicts the Sunnah, we go with the Sunnah of the Prophet. Anyway, let's go back to the narration of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The Prophet said, my place of birth is Makkah and my place of Hijrah is Al-Madinah. If I leave Medina, arriving at Dhul Qa'dah, I pray 2 rakah till I return to it, meaning return to Medina. It is said to Rifa'i, meaning like Abu Aliya, I travel to a town and I stay for 2 months. Shall I shorten Salah? Abu Aliya said, yes. Even if you stay there for 50 years till you return to your hometown. So this is the understanding of the students of As-Sahabat al-Kiram Ridwanullahi Ajmain. They didn't put any had, any limit. If the Sunnah of the Prophet doesn't put any limit, if anybody puts limit, that person, regardless of how high his status is, he has to bring the evidence. But some people might say the Prophet stayed in Makkah for 10, and we know from Ibn Abbas he stayed in 19. But this 10 and 19 doesn't mean it's a limit. The 10 and 19 means that this is something that intend to stay there. He happened that he stayed there for 10 days or 19 days. But it does not mean that we have to limit the number to 10 or 19. No proof for this. The Prophet ﷺ never said the Musafir cannot pay more than this many amount. If there was a narration, clear, of course it's on the top of our head. We're going to follow it, closing our eyes. But there's nothing like this. Ibn Umar said, while we are in Azerbaijan, it snowed for 6 months and we prayed 2 rakah. Azerbaijan, in the Tajikistan area, the Turkmenistan area, one of the towns, their famous town. And the Sahabat al-Kiram used to travel these places because they were at that time under the control of the Muslim Empire. This is authenticated by Imam al-Albani rahmatullahi alayhi in Irwa al-Ghalil. Jafar ibn Abdullah said, Anas ibn Malik was in Asham. Sham area is in Syria, with Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan was at that time the Khalifa of the Muslim Ummah from the Umayyads for 2 months, praying 2 rakah. And this is from the Ziyad of Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, and the isnad is Sahih according to the checking of our teacher Shaykh Ghassan Abdul Fattah. Al-Hasan reported that Anas ibn Malik was in Naisapur. Naisapur is one of the famous towns in Iran, which is now in Iran, and this is the famous town from where many of the big scholars were from, including Imam Muslim ibn Hajjaj al-Qushayri and Naisapuri. Imam Muslim was from also Naisapur. So Anas ibn Malik was in Naisapur. Anas ibn Malik, the Sahabi, in charge of collecting the revenues, jizya, or the zakat al-mal. He used to pray 2 rakah and salam out the prayers 2 rakah, and he would not pray Jummah Salah. Al-Hasan said, we stayed with him for 2 winters, meaning 2 years. He stayed with Anas in Naisapur. Al-Hasan is Hasan al-Basri. He stayed with Anas ibn Malik, the Sahabi, in Naisapur for 2 years. And he continued to pray 2 rakat, all the 4 rakah prayer. And on top of that, he didn't used to attend the Jummah Salah, because we know from the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Sahaba, there is no Jummah prayer and there is no Eid prayer for the Musafir. So the Hujjaj, you can chill inshallah and do not be worried. But however, if you are in Makkah and Medina, that's a different issue. You're praying in the Haram, you go and attend the Jummah Salat inshallah ta'ala. More evidences. Abu Wail traveled with Masruq, the student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, to As-Silsila, it's one of the town, and he shortened his salah. Abu Wail, the student of Masruq, the student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and also famous student of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. He stayed there for many years, praying short salah. I said to him, "O Abu Aisha, what makes you do that?" He said, "The practice of the sunnah. Iltimas is sunnah." He said, "Iltimas is sunnah. I'm holding on to the sunnah." He continued to pray the shortened salah till he returned back to his hometown. And this is reported by Imam Abdul Razak in his Musannaf, and the isnad of this narration is sahih. That's why Imam Ibn Taymiyyah in Majmu' al-Fatawa, he said it very beautifully. He said, and please memorize this, because we are not memorizing this from Ibn Taymiyyah because Ibn Taymiyyah said it, but this matches exactly what is from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. Anyone who studied the Sunnah who would know that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did not legislate for the traveler to pray except 2 rakah. Meaning, he's saying those who say you can pray 4 rakah, don't follow that. And did not limit the travel to a specific era or place, nor he limited the staying period not for 3 days or for 4 days or for 12 days or for 15 days, and we also add 19 days, because this is the famous opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. That's why a lot of the people are confused, and they go to Sahih Muslim and they look at the first narration in the kitab and the traveler's prayer, and they see the statement of Ibn Abbas. They say, oh, the 19 should be there. It should not be, because Ibn Abbas is not the only one who is saying this. This is his opinion. If you study it, it's just his opinion. But we have other Sahaba who clarified that you cannot put any had, any limit to this. Then he said, rather should shorten the salah as long as he is traveling, as used to do more than one of the early scholars, as was done by more than one of the early scholars. And he's referring to the Sahabat al-Kiram, the Tabi'i, and so on and so forth. Then he brings the example of Masruq, which we just mentioned with an authentic isnad. Masruq was appointed a governmental position which he did not like, and he stayed there for many years, shortening the salah. And this is what he mentioned in Majmu' al-Fatawa, Mujallad, volume 24, page 17. That's why Imam Ibn Qayyim, his student, said, فَهَذَا هَدِيُّ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. And this is the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, وَأَصْحَابِهِ, and his companions, كَمَا تَرَى, as you can see, وَهُوَ الصَّوَابِ, and this is the correct position. I hope, inshallah ta'ala, in this episode, it should be clear to people what should be the Islamic definition of Safar, and all the things that you hear, how to leave it aside, and how to have yaqeen, trust that there is no distance limit, there is no time limit, there is no muddat, meaning like a specific time limit in the certain location that you stay, but rather the concept of which city that you live in, and what is the map of that greater area that you should study, with which, inshallah, after you study with the scholars, the righteous scholars, inshallah, should be clear to you that these are the areas when you leave to go to another area, inshallah, the traveling will become, or this movement will become a safar, and you will, inshallah ta'ala, will become a musafir. In our next episode, we are going to talk about certain practical scenarios. Like, for example, one of the sister asked the other day, my mother travels from Bangladesh and comes to Austin and lives with us for 13 months. She is confused what she should do. Should she shorten her prayer as long as she is staying here, according to what you learned today? And we're going to have more clarification, inshallah, in the next class. We're going to understand all of these different scenarios, so you can map yourself in these movements that you do for work, for study, for Hajj, for all these things, inshallah, for traveling, for visiting your parents, for visiting your children, and so on and so forth. And inshallah, we're going to discuss in our next episode. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.